Let's see which area we can attend and do a small cleanup for this code. A professional design, you should have a complete separation of design and the way you handle the controllers, model, whatever. So that's what we often say, model view controller, have everything separated. Somehow we are getting into that point because the create table row does the view preparation. It just work as if creating a view. And of course this particular function, it handles the event, and there is one more function which handles the event of a specific cell. Somehow we separate it. Let's see some sort of way if we could clean up the code. If you see this part, this same code has been used twice. This is the redundant coding. This is not a good idea to start with. So we have to better we create a method, take the code somewhere and put it somewhere, so reuse it as much as possible. And one more thing, as soon as the data is updated, I am just recreating the table. If you do not want this approach, you may simply disable it and enable the previous one. This will slightly look faster. If you see that, in every single click the focus shift change. So because the table is not recreated, just updated. And if you refresh also, you should see the same data. Fine, cool. So let me move this to a specific or separate function. Am I into the right block? Yes. On complete. I'm just having a convention on something like that because I have a practice stating that most of the JavaScript code will be called whenever certain event is performed. So something is happening. That's the reason I just keep a prefix on. You may have your own naming convention, but still this helps to write a meaningful object utilization. Some user may get a confusion that these functions are already there, whether it is not a user defined or something like that. So usually users gets a little confusion when we using this strategy. Okay, couple of things I need to pass it as an argument. Target missing input field and index key, all those things needed. I'm moving this so that target this is much cleaner solution instead of we'll make sure it doesn't disturb our coding or anything else. So if it works, fine. So little cleanup. Okay, this is fine. And now this is where I'm going to do a change. I'm not liking this way that particular HTML is built, too much of concatenation. Instead I want to do in a cleaner way. But before that, let me add a couple of data. Here you are seeing 3 rows are there for this table. If you right click and use a page view page source, in the HTML block you do not see any reference about the table rows being added to a table body, because that was dynamically created, as we already know, because it was done by the JavaScript. But if you really want to know what is exactly happening to the elements after JavaScript take over the control, you can still verify them. Of course, we have a good web inspector and all the browsers. If you go and select the elements tab, make sure you just go to the div. It is highlighting where you are selecting. In that, the table, if you just go and see, okay, this is table head, we already know. The table body, if you see the table body, 3 rows being added. Each row has a individual cells or table data. So this part was dynamically added, but if you notice, this is the end DOM which was added or appended by JQuery and produce this result. So right clicking view source may not give you the absolute result, it only displays the static HTML whatever you wrote, but whatever the dynamic thing added, it is better always see in this tab, in elements tab, you can see what was appended. If you notice, the on click was added in the TD itself, because this is how we wrote the HTML. This is how we have written on cell click, and I am passing argument 1, 2, 3. So I am sending 3 arguments, of course the first being the context or dollar this or jQuery specific context or target, and of course the index and the key I am passing it, but I am passing them in the inline itself. Instead, let me try an alternate. I'm going to create a simple HTML tags or elements in JavaScript, so that we can easily append them instead of concatenating. First, say tr DOM just a table row alone, and individually I'm going to create the rest of them. td sl DOM okay. Let me create the respective DOMs that are required. We'll also extend with the delete option along with this. So name, what else we have? Subject, sorry. Okay. Each are individual DOM, tr, td. So td is going to be a simple one, no problem for us to add a index serial number. This is fine. And this one also going to hold first name. Fine. Subject, because we are already inside a for loop, we are iterating, preparing an object. So the whole bunch of thing I created separate objects, I'm trying to reproduce the same design now. Okay, now how I can merge everything? Question. Merging looks like it's slightly difficult because I cannot concatenate, because each DOMs are having close and end tag, start and end tag. TR itself is having start and end tag, and TD, everything is having a start and end tag. But whereas this particular design required the TR tag first open, in between everything added, then finally TR gets closed. But here, even though I separated them as a single object, concatenating going to be a little difficult. To avoid that, jQuery gives us easiest way. That's what I was telling. Instead of having a string-based representation of the same HTML, why don't we use a jQuery-based representation? when I use them or when I create them as a jQuery specific object, I can enjoy all the features provided by jQuery. I can treat this particular object as a DOM specified by a jQuery object. I can use the various utility functionalities whatever jQuery provides to me. I made everything as a jQuery specific object. Now let us see serial number, first name, mark, subject. Everything is going to be concatenated to this particular row. So a row is a set of all these three objects. So what I can do, there is a function, we already know append is there. There is also a function called append to. Okay, SL append to table row. In the row, first cell added, and td, what else? First name DOM append. Sometimes the suggestion won't work, but doesn't mean you're doing or something non-existing. As I already told you, this object has become a jQuery specific. All jQuery related functionalities is applicable. You can very well use it. TD subject, I think. After that only. Now, first a row prepared, and in the row every individual cells being added to that row. So of course all the four in this case being added to this table row. Now just add this to your table. So the previous one was simply made as in this way, and most of the code we have written in JavaScript, and I'm just appending to them. So let me save and run. But yes, there may be a little difficulty, but at least, of course, yeah, it is working. Let me add one more. It works. But the problem here is I did not add any event listeners, so I should bring it back, the edit feature which we added. Here we haven't added any event listeners. That we are going to work on to bring it back. Previously we added all the event listener in here itself. Here also I can do that, but further complicating these elements going to be little difficult because we want to keep a simple HTML tags. Later any kind of addition we will handle through jQuery itself. So I'm going to attach a couple of event listeners, or I'm going to write the same, or which is something equivalent to defining in inline. For example, I'm going to add on click for each TD elements. Let me add it. Yes, I'm better I write at the end of the line. TD first name. Since it has become a jQuery object, I can simply use the click utility to attach a function callback. Oh, sorry, click callback. So whenever that particular DOM gets clicked, it is going to give me a callback over here. Similarly, I'm going to add the callback for all. TD, what is that, subject. Okay, all callbacks been added. If at all you want want to capture event, of course you can use the same. So you can capture the callback of the particular function. Okay, what we in fact were calling, we were calling this function on click and context and index and the keyword. So let me call that function. On cell click, the first argument, it requires a target nothing but the same, so it is called, okay, here we are going to have a little difficulty, but let me try that. This is the target, index is nothing but I, and the keyword okay. So this way I can reproduce the same event or click events, but it has a serious bug or serious error. uh, Maybe once I run I can show you what is exactly there. No problem, it became editable. But if I click on other elements also, the last one gets selected. Somewhere in other way, the index is going wrong because it is wrongly selecting. Whatever I do, it's just select the last one. I select the first element, selecting the last. Okay, let me add one more data. Okay, I added one data, but still it goes to the last one. Okay. Time to debug what exactly is going wrong. And this is also something it is saying undefined and all the stuff. Okay. Okay. The reason, you are inside a function, a callback function, which does not have any scope about this particular for loop. Mean this particular callback is being called only after the loop is executed. The entire loop is completed. So the final I value would be 3 or 4, and that's the value only being called over here because the loop is completed the task. But whereas the same error I did not get in this block, for obvious reason, I had the on click inside the element itself. So the on click every time, when this particular block, when every time is iterated, the I was having an incremental value. That time I did not have any issues. But whereas in this approach, the callback function, usually callback functions are quite asynchronous. It only works only when certain condition met. So the condition is going to be called, or the callback is only going to happen only when the loop is completed. So it may be giving you a wrong index. So is there any way I can send the arguments like I did in this example? If you notice, click calls a function, but also it requires certain argument to be passed. In this case, JQuery gives me one more, of course, method overload feature. You can add any object along with the callback function. Whatever object you are pushing over here can be captured inside. So here, what are the things needed? One is the target, and of course it requires the index, and it requires the key name. Key name probably we can hard code it, that's not an issue. So I'm going to create a JavaScript object. I'm going to mention, say, base target, some name. Okay. Since it is an object, I can add as many as argument I want. Index I. Same way I'm going to do for others. Okay. This is the way you can send the argument inside a callback function. But how I can retrieve inside? It can be retrieved using, you already have a event, sorry, where this, yeah, event argument. So I can capture them in this way. The first one requires a context. So event dot data dot whatever the key or attribute name you use. The I event dot data dot, in this case, index. So the callback function has a event parameter which gives you, okay, click event has happened. Okay, the click event has happened to this element called tdf name DOM in a given index. So when every time when it is performed, what was the index of the particular DOM, and I am sending them as an argument, and I can capture those argument using same event. Data is if you notice, just print the event output, you will have a attribute called data. In that data you have all the values, whatever you sent, you can capture them back. The same I am going to do for all. Okay, now let us see if it works. Now I can select whatever item I'm picking it. Works. So refresh also working. So this is one exact replacement of the one what we have written. Though it is looking simple at this point, but when your requirement becomes complex, doing this kind of templating or this kind of way of handling the HTML may be very difficult. Instead, you create a base template and augment the template with the additional callback functions such as event listeners, or maybe adding additional attributes, style sheet, whatever it is. You can do everything through the JavaScript itself instead of writing in this way. If you require the particular click event or callback event along with certain arguments, you can simply attach one JavaScript object just before the function callback, and the same can be captured using the event dot data dot whatever attribute name you specified inside this object. So the target was injected through this object, and index also injected through this object, and the same I am getting inside. So that on the function callback, whenever it is triggered, it will pick the right index and right target so that the right row or cell can be modified. So this is a proper way of writing or creating a dynamic UI and DOM manipulation, not this way. Though we find very easy to do this in this way if you have a good understanding over concatenation, but once your code becomes much complex, you will have a very difficult time to maintain it. So in this example, the whole bunch of thing became a JavaScript almost. So if there is any place, if I am missing anything, that also we can do. See, this is really a bad solution still looks like. What I am going to do instead of this one, why don't I do this one? So I can remove that. So we just have a small template created. We removed as much as hard-coded HTML codes. Everything we everything we use the JavaScript to create the dynamic UI. Let me see if I can do additional. If I can introduce additional jQuery utility function. Okay, if I can change any style sheet, or if I can change any CSS attributes, or CSS if I can define any CSS standard, that also I can do using jQuery. For example, the highlighted cell or the cell which got clicked, you want to display in a different color. So that we can do. So where the click event is happening, we have to identify, okay, the click event is because of this particular function on cell click. So whenever the cell is getting clicked, what I can do, so this is what the target. Okay. I have a function called CSS because it's a target being a jQuery object. I can add a background color, the CSS equivalent. For example, how we define a background color, this keyword, the same keyword I'm just typing over here. Change the background color to a different one. You can introduce any HTML color code. DD, in my case it is a gray color, but if you want to have a different color code, you can keep it. So whenever the cell is clicked, the cell slightly grayed out. You can notice the color change is happening, but the color change is looking like permanent. Okay, we have to work as soon as the cell is unchecked, we should revert it to the same color. So let's see where the uncheck is happening. This is where the uncheck is happening on complete. So when the user done with the change, we will revert it back to the normal. What was the basic or normal color we were using? This one. So we will set it back. Whenever user changes, that particular cell is highlighted with a different background color. When the user done with the changes, goes back to the normal color. So highlighted cell has a different color. We can do a lot of things. So dynamically I can take control over the entire DOM, and of course I can do whatever changes using the JavaScript. It looks like the further development is going to be more on the JavaScript, though the document produces an HTML output. And that's the reason I said this particular training program name is HTML5, but we'll be doing a lot of JavaScript work. Of course, things started now. So jQuery also gives me an option to update the style sheet preferences, or style sheet. I can dynamically add additional element, argument, or attribute that can be applied to a specific DOM, because everything I am converting into a jQuery object. So I'm using all the feature my jQuery object or jQuery file is giving to me. I can go ahead and use it. So in this case, the CSS specification also being applied. The last requirement, we have to add the delete option. So I'm going to add one more cell along with that. additional cell. So when I add a new header, of course, see, I need to add additional. So here I'm going to keep a delete button or maybe text, whatever it is. So let me add one more row, sorry, one more cell. So actually that is a dynamic one, we have to write it over here. Okay. We added a delete button for each row. So clicking this should make sure that particular line is removed. So let me add one more click listener. Function callback. Something. Okay, so we would definitely require an index to be sent. So let me add index. Okay, so the index being sent as an additional argument. Now let us proceed deleting it. First thing, we have to remove TBL record. TBL record is an array. So I'm going to remove an element from that array. So removing can be done using the function called splice. If you pay attention to the argument, it takes number of arguments: start, delete, count, and some sort of additional objects. A splice function can either add a specific number of elements to a given index, or it can also remove a specific element in the given index. Splice can do two jobs. Splice can insert an element to a specific index. I have a 10 numbers of items in the array. I want to add an item into 4th index. Assume a specific row I would like to insert. The splice can also be used. Or if I have to remove an item which is an index on 4 or 5, that also I can do. The first one, which one you would like to, or which index you would like to delete. So the start being event data index. How many data I would like to delete? Yes, only one single data. So in this case, the splice, in the given index, it is going to delete one item. If you keep 0, it won't do anything. So if you keep 1, it will delete one item. So if you keep 2, in the given index, it will delete the subsequent 2 items. So starting from 4th index, delete 2 items mean the 4th index and 5th index item will get deleted. But for me, just 1 is enough. So I'm just going to remove it. Once I am done with that, I need to update the database and do. So let me update the database for storage. So local storage updated, and recreate the table. Let's see how it works. I'm going to delete this one. So serial will be re-indexed anyway, so I'm going to delete the record called Rajan. It's gone. So I can delete that. So the change is permanent. All the data have been deleted. So I can easily add, update, delete. I can do almost all the work. So the entire transaction is completed in this case. At least the CRUD or CRUD part we have completed. I can create a record, retrieve the record, update the record, and delete the record. So that's what we call CRUD or CRUD. Since the nouns I can pronounce it in any way, so that's not an issue. So this particular example, we covered various jQuery utility functions and the way convert a normal string based HTML into a jQuery specific object, and we even recommended to use that as much as possible. And this way of creating, dynamically adding in HTML, what we usually call it is called templating. We often call that as a templating. I just create a signature, a template, then dynamically inject the values. So some developer prefer to call it as a templating. But what we have done here is quite systematic. I just created a base template without any data. Later the data got added and dynamically the DOMs have been manipulated, and of course those things started working as expected. Not only to that, the dynamically created DOMs also having various event listeners. Since those things were jQuery object, I utilized jQuery specific functions to add various event listeners. When event listeners being added to a jQuery object, it has a function callback, but along with that it also allows us to send a customized additional parameters as a jQuery object. That also we used, and we injected them whenever the function is performed, a callback function performed, that could be retrieved using the event.data. So each will have its unique index instead of this I value, because this loop would have got completed when the click event is happened. So this is the proper way of creating a callback function. This is the proper way of sending or injecting the context, or in fact what I'm trying to do, I'm sending the this keyword inside the function. Previously the this was dynamically added on every iteration of this particular loop. So that was not an issue. But in this case, since I separated everything as an individual single object, so it would be very difficult to identify which the context that this I'm referring. So I'm just injecting them, injecting the dependency inside, and then I'm using it wherever it required. This style of coding I'm going to use throughout now. So most of the design I'll be simply going ahead, writing in JavaScript and creating the UI.